So, on what issues am I running? Why are these important issues? Well, first of all, I think that there is one issue now that has a level of importance that will never go away, and that's national security. I think that the popular, you can tell, if you get on the League of Women Voters website, you can find out what the issue du jour was when it was responded to by the Warner and Gilmore campaigns. You can tell that they filled out those questionnaires before the financial crisis, because both of their questions were about what's the toughest problem we're facing is energy. Both of them answered energy. We've got to have an energy policy here in this nation. And of course, this was no doubt responded to before the financial crisis, but when gasoline prices were high, now gasoline prices, even in Charlottesville, are getting down close to $3 a gallon. In other places, believe me, it's sub $3 a gallon. But I think that certainly national security is always going to be a major issue. If we didn't know it before 9/11, we know it now. And it may not be the issue that people are talking about right now, but it's so vital. We cannot enjoy our lives. We cannot enjoy the fruits of our labor without national security. The question is, how do we achieve national security? Libertarians think, almost without exception, and certainly I think, that the best way to achieve national security is, first of all, to have a non-interventionist foreign policy. That is, I think, extremely important. An interventionist foreign policy is dangerous and is expensive. And I think there's one thing that this financial crisis is telling the U.S. people, the U.S. government. I don't know if they're listening and hearing this, but I think there is one message here: it's get your fiscal house in order while you still can. I think that's a message of the financial crisis right now, both to individual Americans, but also to the U.S. government. I don't think that's what they don't want to hear. The politicians don't want to hear that. I don't think they're hearing that. As a part of that, I think that certainly getting the U.S. Military out of Iraq is a no-brainer in my opinion, as safely as quickly as possible. But one other thing I think is very important for long-run national security, and that is free trade among the nations of this world. First of all, it's a pro-consumer policy. It's always a lot of people position free trade as us versus them. We've got to go to the negotiating table and get something because the other side, it's like we're on opposing sides in some sort of conflict. It's not that way. Free trade is people in one nation selling goods to people in another nation. That's all it is. It is a pro-consumer policy, first of all. And that should be the point of trade policy, is to be a pro-consumer trade policy, because it's the only thing we all are. We're all consumers. After that, you're either a college professor, or you work in the newspaper, or there are all sorts of, you're a doctor, an attorney, an accountant. All sorts of people then go into different lines of work, and they have competing interests in the economy. But we are all consumers, therefore the government should institute a pro-consumer trade policy and stick to it. But we ought to enter into trade agreements, free trade agreements with other nations, but it ought to go beyond that. The United States should unilaterally drop its trade barriers and its tariffs in order to set an example, first of all, for other nations around the world, but to bring other nations and other peoples of the world into a great capitalist peace. That is the way the war on terror will be won in the long run. Textiles are very important to Pakistan, and to the people of Pakistan. And what does it say to the people of Pakistan if we erect barriers preventing their textiles from being sold in the United States, or sold only with a high tariff that makes them relatively uncompetitive to textiles that are manufactured in the United States? What does it say to them about who should you side up with? Should you side up with civilized society, or should you affiliate with potential terrorist organizations? What's in your best interest? We need to make it, I'll give you an example. Europe, racked by wars, World War I and World War II in the first part of the 20th century. These days it is unthinkable that there would be a great European war. And why is that? It's bad for business. And it may sound tacky to some people to say that, but you know what? It's a darn good reason. If it's people are prospering, people are cooperating with each other, it is a marvelous reason to avoid a war, that it's bad for business. And plenty of other reasons as well. but it is free trade over the long run. It's going to win the war on terror, and it's a policy that the United States should pursue relentlessly. We are drifting toward protectionism, as are other nations, far too much. We need to stay on that course as a nation. The other big reason this year, I think this year is important, is our biggest economic problem. And it's not high energy prices. And it's not even the financial crisis that is currently going on in Wall Street. Our biggest economic problem in this nation is our aging population and the coming entitlement spending explosion. And this is the first year that the first wave of the baby boomers are eligible for Social Security. You've got people who were born in 1946, some of whom have opted to start taking Social Security payments at the age of 62 in the year 2008. Saw the story back in January. Some woman who was born a few seconds, I think, after midnight on January 1, 1946, in January of 2008 signed up for Social Security. This is the beginning of a demographic tidal wave that is, first of all, going to challenge the Social Security system in terms of its fiscal sustainability. Social Security will begin running a deficit 9 years into the future in 2017. And by the way, if you've heard about the Social Security Trust Fund, of course, you may know that it's a whole bunch of baloney. Actually, it's not. There are government securities in the Social Security Trust Fund. All these years, when Social Security's been running a surplus, where'd that extra money go? Well, the Social Security Administration transferred those funds to the general federal government. In exchange, they got general federal government securities. All right? Well, now, when Social Security, 9 years in the future, begins running a deficit, what are they going to do? Well, we don't have any cash. Well, we've got these government securities. We can give them back to the general federal government and get cash in exchange. Okay? Sounds good, but where's that cash going to come from? It's going to come from taxes or borrowing. The Social Security Trust Fund is a complete economic illusion, and because ultimately it has to be backed up by the taxation or borrowing of the federal government. Aside from the fact that Social Security is just a terrible deal for younger workers who will get almost no real return. Some workers are thought to get negative real return. There are no property rights in Social Security. It's bad for minorities. I fail to understand how minorities, because you don't have property rights, it's not heritable, and I've always failed to understand exactly why it is that minorities tend to get behind the Democrats, demagogue the Social Security issue, when it would be in their interest to have some sort of personal account in Social Security where they would have property rights, be able to pass those funds along to their heirs.